This is Grant Cameron, and I'd like to make a statement on the passing of my good friend Stanton Friedman yesterday. I've known Stanton since the late 1970s. Stanton was involved, many people may not know, was involved with the release by the Canadian government of final declassification in 1978 of the Department of Transport file, which held the records of Wilbert Brocco Smith. Stanton worked with a guy out of Hamilton who actually changed his name to Mr. X. And Stanton and Mr. X were putting a lot of pressure on the government to reveal the files that were being withheld. One of the key documents in the UFO field is the top secret memo. And if you will see, there's actually some handwriting. The one copy that floats around is actually Stanton's copy of the top secret memo that was released and declassified in 1978. Stanton was behind that, and I had worked on the Canadian government flying saucer program and Wilbert Smith, and so I had a lot of contact over the years with Stanton about that. The other thing that Stanton did is he did the very famous interview with Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and I will post this on my White House UFO YouTube channel. He did an extended interview when we went to track the Canadian government material. It was found in Wilbert Smith's private files that a lot of the material was coming from Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and Stanton, being the researcher that he was, didn't just take it at its word. He actually tracked Dr. Sarbacher down in Florida in 1983 and did an audio interview, which I actually have a copy of. So we will post that, and that led to the discovery of Dr. Eric Walker and a number of direct pieces of evidence that indicated that, yes, there had been a crash and that the American government had been involved in this. I was also involved with Stanton Friedman in the 1980s as I was in contact with Stanton and mostly his partner Bill Moore on the whole MJ-12 document. I was involved with that when that was happening. I was watching that material. We were talking to Dr. Eric Walker, who had sort of confirmed to us that the document, the group did exist. And even though I disagreed with Stanton about the MJ-12 document, I believed it had been altered. I firmly believed with Stanton that MJ-12 existed, and I will absolutely maintain that MJ-12 will be confirmed, and Stanton will be vindicated on that. So Stanton and I did a lot in that regard, the same sort of thing. My last meeting with Stanton was in Big Bear Lake in January of this year. I actually had two occasions to sit, and it's really the first time I've had real private conversations with Stanton. I had two long conversations privately with Stanton about his career, how it was going, how it was ending, and asked him about his future, and he talked about his plans. I asked him, what are you going to do at home? I mean, you've been so busy, you've done all this kind of stuff, and he basically stated that he was planning to do 2 books. So I had a long conversation with him there, 2 conversations, and Stanton had just had eye surgery and was moving very, very slowly. Everybody noticed this. We were actually helping him get in and out of cars. And even though he had seriously slowed down in his movement and these sort of things, he was still the same old Stanton, that he was very active. He was very sharp as could be. Had basically the same answers for all the different stuff. And in that regard, he was the same old Stanton. The one thing I'd like to say about Stanton is that even though he did sort of fight with the noisy negativists, mainly they were people outside the UFO community, scientists who didn't believe in UFOs, and he would take them on and debate them. one thing I noticed about Stanton, that he rarely ever criticized anybody inside the UFO community, except for Phil Klass. But a lot of the time, Stanton just did Stanton stuff. Stanton was doing his research. He would watch what other people would say. And I remember in the one conversation I had with him in January, I was talking about a particular researcher who was claiming that he was going to take down the Betty and Barney Hill case. Stanton was caught off guard, and he when I mentioned who it was, normally a researcher would get very upset, and all he did was shake his head and basically say, I was actually responsible for this guy getting involved. So Stanton, in that way, was a different type of guy. Stanton did Stanton's thing. He did a lot of very important work, and I think this will be shown in the years to come. And most of what he has done will be vindicated. The final piece of that evidence is one of the things I talked about Stanton, and I really didn't get very far with him. He didn't seem to think it was all that interesting, was during the 1980s, both his file and Bill Moore and Stanton Friedman both requested their FBI file. I have now filed a mandatory review for the Bill Moore file, was turned down, and have actually gone to an appeal. And Stanton was in the same situation, that most people don't realize that their files in the 1980s, they filed both, I think in 1988, both their files were withheld. And I know this, I was trying to get out of Stanton exactly how many pages his file was, and he said that's probably the same as Moore's. Moore's was 61 pages. 55 pages of that file were withheld. National security, totally secret, national security. Bill Moore went to an appeal on it and lost the appeal, and I've filed for a mandatory review. And Stanton had the same thing. Stanton's file from the 1980s was basically totally withheld for national security purposes, which would tend to indicate that Stanton was onto something. The government was taking him seriously, and so I think that in the future, a lot of what Stanton did set the path for future discoveries, and for the fact that, as Stanton would say, flying saucers are real. So I want to say thank you to Stanton for all your work, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks a lot.
I'll start with the Sarbacher phone conversation. It's not quite complete. He gave me the name of his secretary in Washington whom I called, his old secretary. She couldn't remember anything, said she didn't work for him in 1950. Did work for him later. His number was kind of changed. He's in the phone book in West Palm Beach, but calls are being taken by another number, so I dialed that one.
Hello? Dr. Sarbacher? Yes, sir. Hi, Stanton Friedman up in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. Oh, for heaven's sake. Back up. How are you doing? I'm doing fine, keeping busy. As a matter of fact, I just going through my files there. I was trying to get you when I went down to Florida on the 21st of September, but you weren't there. No, let's see, I was in Washington State. Oh, that's pretty far from Florida. That's as far as you can get to still stay in the United States. Did you stop and see your old buddy in Texas that I found for you? You know, I wanted so much to. Fred Darwin, I was so pleased when you located him. He's really, did you see him personally? No, only on the phone. He is the nicest guy. He sounded it. He was most cordial. I really like Fred, but I didn't get to see him in Dallas. I didn't get to Dallas. I skipped Dallas. I went from here to Atlanta, and Atlanta to Portland. Usually they stop in Dallas. Yeah. But the plane didn't, so I didn't see Fred. But he's a very good friend of mine. We were classmates. Yeah, that's what you had told me, and that was my clue, and that's how I found him. But did you get some good information from him? Well, no, he was most cordial, but it was so well covered up, I guess he didn't know what was going on. I guess you knew.
Covered it up. The only thing, I was talking to one of the fellows in your business that works on UFOs, because I get lots of letters on it, you know.
I'll bet mine was the first.
It might have been. I think it was. And the only thing I remember, see, I was what they call a $1 a year guy then.
Yeah, I remember.
I had to run my own business, my laboratory, and I couldn't go to all the meetings. Now, they did have, or at least I was told, that's when Carl Compton was down there.
Yeah.
I was told that they had recovered a UFO with some people in it.
Bodies, whatever.
I don't know. That's what I think I was told.
Did he tell you where?
Well, we were having the meeting at Wright Field, and I couldn't go.
Oh.
But later on, one of the fellows said to me that those guys, if they were people, were made like insects. They didn't have any skin on their bodies. And I said, they were saying that that's how they were able to accelerate and decelerate without being torn apart. You see, if we were going 1,000 miles a second and stopped in a minute, well, we would be squished.
Not quite, but...
Well, it'd be pretty bad.
Well, you can stand a hell of a jolt if the force is in the right direction and if the duration is sufficiently short.
Yeah.
But this was the Research and Development Board, or did it precede that when you found this out?
I can't remember, and I'm not sure that they were right, whether they were just guessing or something.
Oh, okay. But it is the Research and Development Board meeting you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Did you get any clue as to where the crash had occurred?
Well, it was somewhere out west.
Okay, and do you think that this was, any idea what year this was?
Well, yeah. Let's see, Freddie was then in Washington. It was in the early 50s.
Okay, did they imply that the crash had just happened, or that this had happened sometime?
Well, yeah, the conversation was that it had been recovered. The crash, that's what they were talking about. Okay. And they were going to have a meeting going out to discuss it.
Well, but
over the season.
Let's see, early 50s. Now, the notes that I sent you from Wilbert Smith, do you remember? You do remember talking to him?
Yeah, vaguely.
The Canadian?
Yeah, vaguely.
Okay, his notes were 1950, and let me see the exact date. September 15th were his notes, 1950. He asked you a question that you didn't answer at that time, which was rather fascinating. Maybe you've just given me the answer in a sense. He quotes you as saying, yes, it is classified 2 points higher even than the H-bomb. In fact, the most highly classified subject in the U.S. government at the present time. And
I have the slightest idea why.
Well,
it seems silly to me.
Well, his next comment, that was supposedly what you said, and then his next comment was, may I ask the reason for the classification? And you said, you may ask, but I can't tell you. Do you think that...
because I didn't know.
Oh, okay, not because of this crash. You see, there's no mention of a crash per se in this note. Do you think it could have happened after this?
I don't know. There may have been several of them. There was some talk that there were. The thing sort of crumpled around that time. The RDB.
Yeah.
Eisenhower came in as president or something.
Yep.
And whenever the Republicans come in, they usually stop the research.
Yep.
For some reason or other.
You remember Charlie Wilson?
Yeah.
Research is when you don't know what you're doing or something like that. Wasn't that true?
Here I am, a staunch Republican. When the Republicans get in, they want to put me out of business.
Well, I was reading, one of the things that prompted the call is I had run across my colleague out in California, Bill Moore, had run across the Saturday Evening Post article about the boy genius that you were.
Oh, yes.
Which was a fascinating article, and that was 1950 also. Do you know any clue as to what people were involved besides Van Bush, which clearly...
Oh, Van Eber?
Yeah. Florida?
Well, you know how it is, air conditioning.
Yep.
And you walk into some of these stores and they keep them at about 30 degrees, and the temperature outside is 90.
Or 95.
Yeah. I'd say that once more.
Who else was involved besides Vannevar Bush?
Well, after Bush left, somebody else came in. Now, who was it?
Carl Compton or
No, wait a minute. No, Bush was the head of was the scientific advisor to the president.
Yeah.
His official job. He was also director of the Carnegie Foundation.
Yeah.
And in addition, he headed up something else.
The JRDB at one time.
Yeah, the JRDB.
And then he set up the Research and Development Board, but then I guess Compton took over.
Yeah, then Compton came down and from MIT, and then Compton left, and the other guy, who was it? Wasn't Killian. There was a guy named Killian.
James Killian.
He might have, but I think it was someone else.
Not Kistiakowsky.
No? No.
Wasn't Doolittle involved in any?
No, but that Fred would know.
Oh.
Fred would know who took over after Compton.
Okay. Do you know if I'm very interested in a crash that happened in '47 out in New Mexico, and being New Mexico in 1947, one has to presume that probably Oppenheimer and Groves and those guys were involved.
Very likely.
And maybe the guy who headed Los Alamos, Hilberry, Norman. I think it was Hilberry who was head of Los Alamos, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
But anyway, when the meeting, let's go back to Wright Field for a minute. That was a meeting you didn't go to.
That's right.
Okay, you would have had a top secret clearance, and it would have been required for that meeting? Is that?
I suppose whatever they gave us, I don't know who was doing the clearancing thing.
Do you know who else would have been at the meeting?
No. I remember there was one guy, frankly, I didn't like him very much. He had some company, as I had. Seems to me he was in Philadelphia. And he was going to all the meetings. And acting very smug about it. What the heck his name was? I know it was shortly after that we were out at, I did go to the meeting out at Hughes Aircraft in California. I went out to that meeting.
Do you know if flying discs were discussed there?
No, that had more to do with, that's when Raymo Wiltage was out there.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, he'd come out, I think, from NRL, working on diodes. They had set up a production line at Hughes where the girls used microscopes.
Yeah.
That was the first of the microscope lines, as I recall.
Oh.
And I think the object of going out there was to observe it. I forget. I know they were having that Raymo and Woodridge were having some kind of fight with Hughes because there were a couple of important generals out there from Wright Field, and anyway, the boys wanted to keep the cafeteria open for the general in case he wanted some coffee or pie or something. And Hughes came in and he found it open and nobody in the plant, so he closed it. And I know they were mad as the devil. As a matter of fact, that's what started the fight that led to the formation of the Raymo Wildridge backing from Thompson Products. Yes, that's what started. Yeah, I know because one of Hughes's men came to me. See, in those days I had a much higher rating than Raymo. About the only thing known about Raymo was that he had written some elementary book on radio. See, whereas I was written the Bible for radar. My rating was much higher than either of those guys. And in those days, the people at Wright Field, and in the military, gave contracts on the basis of the trading of the people in these companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, since I was better rated more than Wildridge or Ramo at that time, although they were both older than I had a higher rating, and Hughes tried to hire me because then they couldn't take the contract away from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
When they left, they took the contract with them. Well, Hughes tried to talk me into taking the job. Well, hell, I had a very good laboratory at the time.
In Washington.
Yeah, I was really rolling along, and their laboratory was really operating. We were building General Electric got involved in that Arctic radar system. See, at that time, everybody was afraid Russia was going to send planes over the Arctic.
Yeah, the dew line, I suppose.
Yeah, so General Electric had been given a big contract to put in those radar detectors.
Yeah.
And radar station. And nobody at General Electric knew how radar worked. So the General Electric hired me. And I sent some of my boys, I must have had 200 men up there.
Huh?
What I did, I hired telephone retired men and gave them a course in the high frequencies. You know?
Yeah.
And then I gave them transmitters to take with them. So when they got a problem, they didn't know, they could call me. And we could work it out down here at the lab, see?
You didn't have to get cold.
No. So we did the job for General Electric. General Electric got the contract, but we were a subcontract.
Well, that's...
So we had a big thing going.
So who needed you, sir?
Yeah, I didn't need Hughes, no.
And his troubles.
Yeah, that's right. Although I was a great admirer of Hughes.
He was a rugged individual.
Man, that guy was smart.
Yeah, he was.
He was a lot smarter than people give him credit for.
Well, didn't he have a tool bit patents and stuff?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Not only that, I'll tell you, the laboratories that he set up, he hired very good men. Well, now, after all, Wildridge was the top guy in diodes in those days.
Mm.
That was before transistors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he was down at NRL, he hired him. Now, Ramo was a lower group, although, if you know Ramo personally, I don't know if he's still alive.
Yeah, he is. He's written a book in the last couple of years.
I'll tell you, he's a very clever guy. A clever conversationalist.
Well, I worked for TRW, those for briefly, way back 13 years ago.
Oh, did you?
Clearly, TRW was booming at that time. It is now.
Well, I could have had that.
I'll be darned.
Could have had it. I could have taken it if I wanted it. I didn't want it. You see, because Hughes ended up, really, Hughes had one of his boys on the Thompson Products board. That's how he found out about it.
I
See, when it came up, you know, that these guys could leave Hughes and bring a big contract with them if Thompson Products would finance it. And so he knew about it ahead of time.
I'll be darned.
And he said, well, I'll tell you, I'll put you in, and we'll just short circuit them. They'll be out of a job. You take it.
I'll be damned.
Yeah.
The man himself.
I had no idea. Well, I don't know that I would want to get involved in that big business anyway. It's really not a happy atmosphere to live in.
All management and no excitement, huh?
What?
All management and no excitement.
Yeah. And I'm a laboratory man. I like the lab.
Well, let me go back a bit now. When you say that you didn't go to the meeting at Wright Field, but somebody there told you about...
Oh, some of the men back at the office in the Pentagon.
Ah.
See, we had an office in the Pentagon.
Your office, or...
No, actually, I think it...
You mean the research and development?
Fred was, he was with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
At that time. And he had gotten involved in it. See, we were classmates, Fred and I.
Yeah.
And Fred came to me and asked me if I would help him on that guidance and control.
I see.
For the missiles.
Yeah, he was the chairman of that subcommittee.
Yeah, that's right.
Or went on to be, anyway.
That's right. And I came down and I was on that and worked on it for a long time. And I guess it was over a year, maybe a couple of years. I don't know. I don't remember. But I know it was during that time we had an office we all went to, you know.
The Research and Development Board.
Yeah, the Research and Development Board. And it was sort of like a little cabinet post.
Okay, so it was the guys there who told you about them.
Yeah, it was among those fellows in conversation.
Remember any of those guys?
Not a one. Not a one. Fred would know them all. I should think that somewhere among his files that he would have a list of all the men that...
Oh, yeah. He did. As a matter of fact, he had names at his fingertips, so to speak.
Yeah, well, Fred was right in the middle of it.
Okay, so you think it was one of those guys that...
It was somebody in that group. Yeah, they were just yakking, you know.
Yeah.
Around a water bottle or something.
Okay, so, but... Well,
whether they were talking facts or just a guessing. Because one of the big questions was if these damn things were actually not what you might call an optical illusion or some kind of light beam creating them. They were accelerating at great speeds, and they went in formation. They were, you know, like ducks.
Yeah, and the question was, how the heck do they work?
Yeah, how do they work, and what are they made of? And how can they go so fast and go speed? They can go, we could see one 1 minute, and the next minute it was gone. I mean, it was, you could see it go.
Well, you guys talking about nuclear-powered flight at that time?
Oh, well, possibly, yes. But I know I had certain ideas. See, one of the problems today, we really don't know what gravity is.
Yeah.
We don't know. And I had an idea. I wanted to work on it on one of my theses. My professor didn't believe me. But I had determined that business did not obey the laws of gravity. So I thought, well, gee, there is a leak. I might be able to get nature to tell me something. But they wouldn't let me, they didn't believe me. Well, they believed me, but he said, oh, that's a second-order effect. Which is implying it was in the area of the accuracy of the instrument.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was clearly, it doesn't. Somebody's going to do something about it one day. As a matter of fact, I was talking to someone not so long ago, and right now I'm putting a public company together on some batteries that I just finished developing. And they're unusually powerful batteries. And you'll be reading about it probably in the paper. At least you'll read about it if it goes through. I was talking to the head of the Security Exchange Commission when I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and he said that if I got the red herring into him within the month of November, he'd have it out before Christmas.
I'll be darned. What kind of, should I ask what kind of batteries?
Yeah, sure. Well, both primary and secondary.
What, more watt-hours per pound?
More watt-hours per pound, yeah.
Electric cars, here we come.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a little while for that, but certainly we can make a lot of electric generators for third world people.
Okay.
And they, of course, would be financed by that international bank.
Yep.
So it would be a lucrative thing as a company that'll make some money.
Sounds like a good idea. I should buy some stock, huh?
Well, keep an eye out. You'll see it.
What's the name of the company?
Well, I was going to do it and see what, I developed what is used today as the ILS system for aircraft.
Yeah.
I did that when I was in school. And I later sold it to IT&T. They're building it now, and as you know, it's used all over the world.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they've adapted it now so that it'll land the airplane as well as, without the pilot having to do anything. And that's why we're having such nice landings. But anyway...
well, let me ask you, how was...
I had set up a school to train pilots to use the ILS system. And I called it was in Washington, I called it the Washington Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
So I still use that name.
Oh.
So it'll be under the Washington Institute of Technology if I am successful.
A very witty title, if you'll pardon.
Well, I tell you, there's an advantage to having a name like that. When you do project work for corporations, you have a name like that, the IRS people, in looking over the books, think it's an educational institution, so they don't bother checking it.
That sounds reasonable.
As much as they would if it were Joe Smith's company,
Yeah. Let me get back to Wilbur Smith. How did he happen to wind up with you, as opposed to anybody else in the committee? Do you know who referred him to you? Or?
No.
Were there any other Canadians you can think of that you had any dealings with?
I don't remember.
I mean, like the military liaison man at the Canadian Embassy was a guy named Arnold Wright at that time. And I don't know whether he was dealing with, well, there was a famous Canadian, Omar Salant, who was sort of the Vannevar Bush of Canada, if you will, at that time. Would there have been liaison between your committee and the Canadian Defense Research
I
Board?
wouldn't be surprised. The guy that would be in Fred.
Okay.
He'd know that for sure.
Yeah.
I should think he would know.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Let me ask you a different sort of question. Since my initial contact with you, have any government people bothered you about this?
I haven't. No. There's somebody in California. Is it Steinman?
Steinman, yeah.
Yeah. Who has written a number of letters, and I answered one just recently.
Oh.
I think.
He's a strange man, but judging by his letters to me.
I don't know. I know he got to get a letter in here every 15 minutes. And I'm embarrassed because I'm not here, you know?
Yeah.
I come back and there are 2 or 3 letters, and some of them typed, some of them longhand. I think, God, he really is working.
Well, he's a sort of peculiar guy, but yeah. You were probably there was a guy, well, maybe he was doing it for a guy named Todd Zecco. Somebody in my travels mentioned of him. Todd's a really not to be dealt with.
How in the world did you ever find Fred Darwin?
Well, I contacted the Harvard University Alumni Association.
Well, I have tried a dozen times. They never had anything for me.
Well, I pushed him a little, and I didn't know his class, of course, but...
I could have given you that.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, it wasn't that much trouble. I sent them a letter, and then I called them because I was out of town, and they said they were sending me a reply. I said, well, can you give it to me over the phone since I won't be home for 2 weeks? And they gave me an address, and I called information, and there he was in Dallas. So it was
one nice guy.
Yeah, he sounded real nice. He sent me a copy of one of the letters, at least, that he sent you. And, you know, I can, what's the word I want? I can associate with him because I worked in industry, big companies and all that sort of stuff, and saw some of the same things that he had seen, and it's a crazy world out there. Well, okay, I would gather you don't have any records or notebooks from this period of time, do you?
Fortunately, I don't. I might have had some, but I'll tell you, I've been looking under in the sea for certain. I'm looking for certain types of enzymes that I've been using in some of the energy converters. And when I pulled in here, I had a yacht about 90 foot for a sailor. And we did the diving. I was trying to get marine microbes. See, a microbe is basically a bundle of enzymes.
Yeah.
And I was after the microbe. Then I would try to extract from the microbes the enzymes I wanted. Now, when I came in here, sailboats have an awful lot of sails for different kinds of weather. And I wanted to clean out my sail locker. It was so loaded with things. And I bought a house with a basement, which is an unusual thing in Florida.
Yeah.
We usually have basements. Because the closest place I could get to store my sails was about 10 miles away. So I thought I'd buy a house with a basement and put my sails in the basement. Well, it ended up with putting a lot of my records down in that basement. About 2 years ago, we had about 11 inches of rain in 2 hours.
There went the basement.
Basement was full of water. I got the water out as fast as I could, but boy, I lost cabinets full of records. That was a real sorry thing. A lot of instruments too. A lot of equipment.
Oh dear, there goes the record down the drain, literally.
I tell you, it was a mess. But the worst part with the books, especially one of the things that I needed, and I need it now, is I had one of those unabridged dictionaries, you know, with that onion skin paper, so they weren't so thick. Yeah. Damn things cost a couple $100. Boy, I lost that. Now that hurt me more than some of my notes.
Well, thinking back to the same period of time, now early 50s, was there anybody, a secretary at your company or anybody else that you
worked real close with is still around, or that you might have talked about this to?
My cousin, George Sarbacher, but he died.
Oh.
Let me see. Well, I had a letter recently from Bill Green, but he was working in a different area. He never, and at that time I didn't work with him. Let's see. My secretary is still around, but I don't think she would remember.
What's her name?
Oh, wait a second. I think it's her name. What is her name? That I can give you. But she has a short memory. It seems like, I don't know, but maybe I tried to get to see her when I was in Washington. Wait a minute. What's her name? I have a lawyer.
He was looking things up here.
I'm kind of involved in an oil field. And brought it in. Got started, she can't remember for sure. If she could, it would mean a lot of money to me. Came up recently on a...
What do you need from her? The name of the lawyer?
Well, no.
That's the end of the tape portion. We spoke a couple more minutes, and he did dig out her name, and I called her, and she said she didn't work for him in 1950 and didn't remember anything, and so forth, unfortunately.
That was Stan Friedman talking with Dr. Robert I. Sarbacher of West Palm Beach, Florida, just after he received my letter from Bill Moore